Every summer, the snow at 16,500 feet pulls back just enough to give up its dead. And this year, like every year before it, a skull works loose from the ice at the edge of a small round lake in the Indian Himalayas, the crown of it split by a short, deep crack, no wider than a cricket ball. Nobody agrees on exactly how many skulls like it are up there. The counts run from 300 to as many as 800, but every single one is another person who never came down. That crack is real. It belongs to one of as many as 800 human beings who have lain scattered around this shore in a place called Roopkund, Skeleton Lake, for centuries. For 80 years, scientists thought they finally understood what killed them. They were wrong about almost everything except that one detail, the crack in the bone. In 1942, a British forest ranger named Hari Kishan Madhwal was patrolling this ridge when he looked down and saw the ice glinting with bone, skulls, ribs, whole skeletons, some still gripping strips of leather and rusted iron. Colonial officials did not think history. They thought war. It was the middle of the Second World War, and for a tense stretch, British authorities feared they had stumbled on a hidden Japanese force, frozen mid-advance, through a back door into India. That theory collapsed almost as fast as it formed. The bones were plainly too old, but it left behind the real question, the one that has outlived every guest since. Who were these people, and why did so many of them die together in the same frozen bowl of rock, far above the tree line, with no village, no road, no obvious reason to be there at all? Answering that question properly would take more than 70 years, and when an answer finally came, in 2019, it was stranger than any invasion. Roopkund itself is barely a lake at all, a shallow bowl of meltwater scarcely 40 meters across, tucked beneath the Trishul Massif at over 5,000 meters, inside what is today the Nanda Devi National Park. For most of the year it is frozen solid and buried under snow. Only in the short Himalayan summer does the ice loosen its grip and the lake gives back what it has been holding. To put that height in perspective, at over 5,000 meters, Roopkund sits roughly level with Everest Base Camp, thin air, punishing wind, and no easy way down once the weather turns. Skulls half sunk in gravel, rib cages still curved around empty air, femurs stacked against the rocks like driftwood. And beside the bones, the belongings of the dead. Iron spearheads, bamboo staves, rings, the stitched soles of leather sandals that have outlasted the feet inside them. Some of those rings are still looped around finger bones that have shrunk to almost nothing inside them. Some of those sandals were bound with straps built to last a season, not a lifetime. In the coldest, driest pockets of the site, researchers have even found scraps of skin and tufts of hair still clinging to bone. Nothing here was buried. Nobody dug a grave. Whoever these people were, they died in the open, and the mountain simply closed over them where they fell. The mountain has its own explanation, and people here have been telling it for generations. Roopkund sits directly on the route of the Nanda Devi Raj Jat, a pilgrimage that even now, every 12 years, carries thousands of devotees 280 kilometers through these peaks, following a four-horned ram and the palanquin of the goddess Nanda Devi herself, toward a lake just beyond this one. A symbolic journey said to carry the goddess from her childhood home back to her husband Shiva's abode high in the peaks. The story told along that route is specific, and it is dark. A king named Jastaval, travelling from Kanauj with his pregnant queen, their servants, and a troupe of dancers, is said to have brought music and celebration into ground the goddess considered sacred and hers alone. Nanda Devi, the story goes, was enraged. She sent hail down on them, hard as iron, and the entire party died where they stood, their bodies left for the lake to keep. For a folk tale, it is oddly precise about the murder weapon. And in 2004, when forensic anthropologists finally got a proper look at the bones under laboratory light, the legend and the science lined up almost perfectly. Indian anthropologist Subhash Walimbe and his team examined dozens of skulls and found short, deep cracks, not the long fracture lines of a fall, not the crushing damage of a rock slide, but small round impact wounds, many of them roughly the size of a cricket ball. Almost every wound sat on the crown of the skull or the shoulders, nowhere else, not the arms people would raise to shield a blow from the side, not the hips or the shins struck by a fall down a slope, just the top of the head again and again, as if every single victim had been struck by the same thing falling from directly above. Radiocarbon dating placed the deaths at roughly the 9th century. A pilgrimage party, caught in the open on a barren ridge with nowhere to run, hit by hailstones large enough to fracture bone. It matched the goddess's story so well that by the mid-2000s the case looked closed. Roopkund had an explanation at last, one that was cinematic, coherent, and, everyone assumed, complete. It was not complete. It was not even close. The 2004 study had only ever looked at a handful of skulls, chosen for how well their wounds could be read. It never asked the one question that would eventually break the entire Hailstorm story open. Were all 800 of these people even the same group of people? In 2019, an international team of 28 researchers, including geneticists from Harvard, from India's Deccan College, and from institutes across Europe, published the deepest look Roopkund had ever received. They sequenced genome-wide ancient DNA from 38 skeletons and mitochondrial DNA from dozens more, and they ran fresh radiocarbon dates on individual bones, not just a representative sample. What they found did not confirm the Hailstorm story. It shattered the idea that there had ever been one story to confirm. The bones sorted into 3 genetically distinct groups. The largest, 23 individuals, carried ancestry consistent with present-day South Asians, though even they were not one uniform population, but several distinct genetic groups from across India. Those bones dated to somewhere between the 7th and 10th centuries, centered near the era the old legend pointed to. And here is the twist. Even that confirmed half of the story couldn't survive. The dating showed they were not deposited in one event, not a single storm, a single afternoon, a single tragedy. Multiple episodes, possibly separated by years or generations, all funneling bodies into the same small lake. But that group was only 23 of the 38 skeletons tested. The other 15 broke the story completely. 14 individuals carried ancestry that traced not to India at all, but to the Eastern Mediterranean, genetically so close to people living today, on the Greek island of Crete, that researchers could find no other population on Earth that matched them better. And their radiocarbon dates did not cluster near the 9th century at all. They clustered roughly 1,000 years later, somewhere between the 17th and early 20th centuries, centering close to the year 1800. A 15th skeleton, dated to that same later window, carried ancestry linked to Southeast Asia. Read that again. People whose closest living relatives are on a Greek island in the Aegean Sea died at over 16,000 feet in the Indian Himalayas. Roughly 1,000 years after the Pilgrims, the local legend blames for the hailstorm. And their bones came to rest in the exact same 40-meter lake. There is no trade route through Roopkund, no fortress, no monastery, no obvious reason a group with roots in the eastern Mediterranean should have been anywhere near this ridge in the 1800s, let alone dying on it. This was never a crossroads. It was, and still is, one of the hardest, most isolated stretches of trail in the entire Himalaya, which makes the presence of any outsider here, in any century, a genuine puzzle and not a footnote. The 2019 team checked for the easy answers and ruled them out one by one. No genetic or skeletal evidence of an epidemic. No sign the two groups were related or even aware of each other. No shared cause of death the bones themselves could confirm. The scientists who wrote the paper were careful and unusually honest about where that left them. In their own words, it is still not clear what brought those individuals to Roopkund Lake or how they died. The hailstorm may explain one death centuries apart from another, in a place two entirely different people somehow both chose or were forced to die in. What Roopkund forces you to sit with is not a single tragedy. It is the strange, quiet possibility that some places simply keep collecting the dead, not because of one storm, one battle, one curse, but because something about the place itself, across 1,000 years and two civilizations that never touched each other, kept drawing people to the same lethal edge of the map. That pull has not stopped. Roopkund now sits inside a UNESCO-listed biosphere reserve, and decades of trekkers walking straight through the skeleton field have already scattered and removed bones as souvenirs, long before scientists could study them. Access is far more restricted today than it once was, with authorities at times closing the final approach entirely. One of the clearest cases anywhere of a modern hiking trail accidentally erasing a mystery before it could be fully solved. And Roopkund is not alone. Across the world's high, cold places, the Alps, the Andes, the Arctic, retreating glaciers are giving up bodies and belongings the ice has held for centuries, sometimes millennia, faster than researchers can reach them. Lost climbers, frozen travelers, entire encampments once swallowed whole. All of it is starting to resurface, and once exposed to open air and sunlight, bone and tissue that survived 1,000 winters can begin to break down within days. The cold has always been a kind of archive. It is only now as that archive melts that we are finding out how much of it we never had the chance to read. The crack in that first skull is still real. The hail was still probably real for at least some of the dead. But the story that crack once seemed to finish, one storm, one party, one afternoon in the 9th century, was never the whole lake. Roopkund held two separate tragedies, 1,000 years and thousands of miles apart, stitched together so convincingly that it took modern genetics to pull the threads apart. There is a stranger story waiting on this channel. A machine pulled from a shipwreck that shouldn't have existed for another 1,400 years, and the century-long argument over what it actually was. That's on screen now, and if Roopkund is the kind of mystery that gets under your skin, Subscribing means you won't miss the next one. History Untold pulls out of the cold.